everyone. Welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. We are here now with a new showtime, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're hoping that this is going to allow you to watch the show really kind of at any time of day. We were before if you haven't ever seen this show before because it was later and now it's at a new time, we were at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. We have now drastically bumped up the show to 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're hoping that this will attract new audiences, and also for those of you who've been enjoying it late at night, you'll be able to then kind of watch it at your leisure throughout the day. So we do have a packed show. A lot happened over the weekend that we're going to get to. We're going to start off with Ron DeSantis quitting his presidential race and immediately endorsing Donald Trump. Here's the tweet that he puts out there, and he's got this Winston Churchill tweet saying, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." However, it turns out that that's not actually a Winston Churchill quote. It's a fake quote, according to the International Churchill Society. It's a nice one, but it's just not real. So he did follow this up with a video explaining, resigning from the campaign, from his presidential race, endorsing Donald Trump. Here is part of what he said.
Now, over the past many months, Casey and I have traveled across the country to deliver a message of hope that decline is a choice and that we can, in fact, succeed again as a nation. Nobody worked harder, and we left it all out on the field. Now, following our second place finish in Iowa, we've prayed and deliberated on the way forward. If there was anything I could do to produce a favorable outcome, more campaign stops, more interviews, I would do it. But I can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign. I'm proud to have delivered on 100% of my promises, and I will not stop now. It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. They watch his presidency get stymied by relentless resistance, and they see Democrats using lawfare this day to attack him. Well, I've had disagreements with Donald Trump, such as on the coronavirus pandemic and his elevation of Anthony Fauci. Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed-over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents. The days of putting Americans last, of kowtowing to large corporations, of caving to woke ideology are over.
Okay, so he's endorsing Donald Trump, saying Nikki Haley's not the one. Joe Biden's certainly not the one that's to be expected. But you see that he's kind of putting the past behind him when it comes to Donald Trump, saying, we might not have agreed things like coronavirus and Fauci, but all, bygones be bygones. So maybe Ron DeSantis is actually looking for the VP slot. That would make the most sense, or certainly a slot in Trump's administration, which he probably would end up getting. I can't imagine Ron DeSantis being left out in the cold, considering a lot of Trump supporters also do like Ron DeSantis. Trump seems to understand that because now Trump is going soft on DeSantis. He has now retired the DeSanctimonious nickname. Here's Trump talking about that.
Okay. He just said, will I be using the name Ron DeSanctimonious? I said, that name is officially retired.
So looks like now they're going to be friends again. Trump also thanked DeSantis and congratulated him about his campaign. Watch this.
Before we begin, I'd like to take time to congratulate Ron DeSantis and, of course, a really terrific person who I've gotten to know, his wife, Casey, for having run a great campaign for president. He did. He ran a really good campaign, I will tell you. It's not easy. They think it's easy doing this stuff, right? It's not easy. But as you know, he left the campaign trail today at 3 p.m., and in so doing, he was very gracious, and he endorsed me, so I appreciate it. I appreciate that, and I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
So now the big question is, does Ron DeSantis have a shot at being Trump's vice president pick? The chances are, I think, much higher now that Ron DeSantis has backed out and immediately endorsed Donald Trump. It'd be one thing if he kind of hemmed and hawed a bit and didn't immediately endorse Donald Trump, but the fact that he did. And look, remember Kamala Harris basically called Joe Biden a racist, and she ended up still being the VP pick. So you can go hard during the election, during the campaign cycle, but at the end, everybody has to kind of take the boxing gloves off and be friends again. So there's a real possibility that Ron DeSantis ends up being his VP pick. So Trump has said now that he is about 25% certain who his VP pick will be and that it's not a shock. Watch this.
You said in our town hall that you had an idea, or you might have already decided about your VP pick. When do you think you're going to make that?
Well, it's never really had that much of an effect on an election, which is an amazing thing. Both election and primary, it's never really had much of an effect. I may or may not release something over the next couple of months. There's no rush to that. It won't have any impact at all. The person that I think I like is a very good person, pretty standard. I think people won't be that surprised. But I would say there's probably a 25% chance it would be that person.
Is Senator Tim Scott on the list now?
No, he's a great guy. He endorsed me. There's an example. Nikki comes from South Carolina. Tim Scott is from South Carolina. But if you look, the governor, great governor, another senator, Lindsey, we happen to like Lindsey. But Henry McMaster knows her very well. He endorsed me. It's very hard for a governor to endorse somebody when you have, Henry McMaster was the lieutenant governor under her, and he endorsed me. Almost everybody in South Carolina has endorsed me. What does that tell you?
Okay, so he says he's 25% certain. It's not going to be a surprise, a pretty standard person. So that could be Ron DeSantis. He could be considered a standard person. I'm not sure. Or maybe it could be Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota. That would be somebody that I would think he would maybe select. I think somebody less standard would be like Carrie Lake, who is not a governor. She of Arizona at the moment. I think she's running for Senate now. So there's some like non-standard people that are a little bit, I think, not your typical, but I would think a governor. I mean, he did have Mike Pence previously, who was clearly not going to be his VP pick this time around. So, look, I'm thinking Ron DeSantis or I'm thinking Kristi Noem. If he's saying it's a standard person that he has in his mind, probably not Tucker Carlson, as much as we were thinking, hey, he hasn't knocked him on the list, but knocked him off the list. But hey, he's only 25% certain, and this guy is mercurial, so he could change his mind at any time, which he often does. Now, I think, though, he says that the VP pick doesn't matter that much, and I think typically it doesn't. I think that there's a strategy of selecting a VP that is opposite of you in some ways, so that you can bring in a wider base for the vote. So at times that person can actually help and bolster the campaign when it comes to the general election. I do think that there is a good reason to wait when it comes to Donald Trump. I think it's smart for him to wait because I think his best play is if he can entice, and it would be difficult, but I think it would be the best play is if he can entice Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be his VP running mate, because right now that's going to be his biggest threat to the path back to the White House. You've got Joe Biden, who is he's not popular. People don't really like him much, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr., though he does pull quite a few Democrats from the Biden, what would potentially be Biden voters, he also pulls a lot from the Trump campaign. So he's a bit of a wild card on how many is he going to take from Trump versus how many is he going to take from Biden. So whoever can swoop up RFK Jr. as their running mate would be able to shore up those independent voters that are going for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That would be the strategy, in my opinion. That would maybe be the smartest thing that Trump could do. Lots of Republicans like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He doesn't say anything that is antithetical to what Republicans care about. They care about the border. That is their number one. That is their number one concern is the border. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been one of the first, certainly for Democrats. I mean, Democrats have been ignoring it completely, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from the very beginning of his campaign has been down at the border, showcasing it, saying we've got a crisis on our hands. So he already plays to the Republican base when it comes to the border crisis. Then people care about the economy. They care about inflation. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. also talks about those types of things. They care about foreign policy in that they like a more Republican stance. He's certainly extremely pro-Israel. So, that also bolsters his Republican base. That is why Robert F. Kennedy Jr. might actually take from the GOP when it comes to the general election, meaning he could be the biggest threat to Trump rather than to Biden. And it might be smart for Trump to instead bring him on board as a VP pick. I don't know if Kennedy would actually go for it, but he might, if that means that he has a shot at actually being in the White House. It would be smart for him to accept that. It'd be smart for Trump to extend it. So we'll see what happens. He says he's only 25% certain, 75% still a wild card. The guy's a wild card anyway. I don't even think he's really 25% certain, just knowing the way Trump is. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting. But DeSantis is out. Nikki Haley is still in. We're going to get to Nikki Haley next. But first, stress may be why you can't lose weight. So if you have moderate to high stress, a doctor-formulated weight loss supplement called Lean could be your solution. Now, chronic stress wreaks havoc on blood sugar, which can cause your body to store excess fat. Stress can also slow your metabolism, which fuels weight gain. And you know all about stress eating and sugar cravings. Well, now the good news. The studied ingredients in Lean have been shown to help maintain healthy blood sugar levels, help optimize metabolism, and keep your appetite under control. So if your life is a bit stressful and you want to lose weight, add Lean to your healthy diet and exercise lifestyle and get 15% off and take free shipping at takelean.com and enter the code KIM15. That's promo code KIM15 at takelean.com. Statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and is not a substitute or alternative for care from a healthcare provider. All right, so the latest CNN New Hampshire primary polls give insight into who likes Nikki Haley. Who are these people who like Nikki Haley? That is what everybody wants to know. So let's go ahead and look through this poll. This is actually interesting, and it gives us some insight into the voter that is interested in Nikki Haley, also what these Republican voters want. So this is the CNN 2024 New Hampshire primary poll. They've got here first choice GOP 2024 presidential candidate, likely GOP primary voters. This was from January 19th of 2024. This is probably why Ron DeSantis dropped out. Because though him and Nikki Haley pretty much came neck and neck when it came to Iowa, Ron DeSantis just slightly ousting Nikki Haley by 1 or 2 percentage points, he's getting stomped in New Hampshire against Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is at 39% for the GOP, the GOP primary voters for New Hampshire, the ones that have registered to vote. 39% prefer Nikki Haley, 50% prefer Donald Trump. So he's still beating her by double digits. But Ron DeSantis there in a dismal 6%. This is why Ron DeSantis backed out. He didn't want to get he didn't want to be harmed like that. It's better to bow out early than to have to look really ridiculous and be way last, third in this by a lot and be trampled by somebody like Nikki Haley. And then you have to wear that for the rest of your political career. They'll point, well, in New Hampshire, you only got 6% of the voters. He came in a distant third. So that's probably why he bowed out. Nikki Haley, 39% of these voters. Let's go on to this next part of the poll here. First choice GOP 2024 presidential candidate, likely GOP primary voters by party registration, January 19th of 2024. Look at this, registered Republicans. Now this is where things shift. 67% like Donald Trump, 23% like Nikki Haley, and 8% like Ron DeSantis. That is quite a difference between the previous poll when it kind of combines everybody who's going to be voting in the New Hampshire primary. When you look at the registered undeclared, this is where Nikki Haley grabs people. She's grabbing these independent voters. Trump gets 30%, Nikki Haley gets 58%, and Ron DeSantis goes down to 4%. So it's these undeclared voters, it's these independents. who apparently just must love war because that's the only thing Nikki Haley talks about. War, war, and more war. I want a Department of Offense. So they're really supporting Nikki Haley. I think it's more of a vote against Trump, to be honest. I don't think they're even paying attention to what Nikki Haley stands for. I think if they really sat and thought about it, would you rather have 4 more years of Donald Trump where, yeah, maybe he says ridiculous things that drive you crazy, or would you rather have World War III? I don't know, take your pick, right? Take your pick. But apparently a lot of voters choose World War III. Scary. Now look at this part of the poll. This is where it gets interesting. The people who are supporting also Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley and how they lean politically. So a lot of those undecided, undeclared voters. Now, I'm an independent voter myself in the state of California, but I will admit I lean left. I'm very libertarian, but I tend to, in my voting habits, lean more to the left. Now, but I can vote any way I want because I'm an independent. The people in New Hampshire have the same, right? They can vote in the Republican primary if they so choose because they're unregistered or they're independent, or they could choose to vote in the Democratic primary. There's really no Democratic primary. So if you're an independent voter in the state of New Hampshire, even if you lean radically left, but you've just never registered for the Democratic Party because maybe you don't really like the Democratic Party, or you don't want to be affiliated with the Democratic Party, or whatever it might be, you can then go and vote in the Republican primary. That's the problem with the New Hampshire primary. Or it's not really a problem, I think, maybe in general, but it's certainly causing an interesting outcome this time around. So look at the way these voters lean in this part of the poll. Liberal, progressive, socialist, 4% of them said that they would vote for Donald Trump, even with that political leaning. But look at Nikki Haley, the liberal, progressive, socialist wing. 91% of them are voting for Nikki Haley. That's who's that's how they identify themselves. Or moderate, 71% Nikki Haley, 22% Donald Trump. Conservatives, now people who consider themselves conservative or even libertarian, conservatives 17% like Nikki Haley. And yeah, only 21% of libertarians like Nikki Haley versus 61% Donald Trump, because libertarians tend to be pro-free speech. They tend to be against war. And Nikki Haley is against free speech and she's pro-war. So what does that tell you when you've got liberal, progressive, socialist voters? 91% of her voters saying that that's how they lean, or moderate, and they're going for the anti-free speech, pro-war candidate. It really showcases the state of where liberal, progressive, socialist politics are. That they are sadly in the exact spot that conservatives have constantly pointed out. You know, those socialist voters are going to take our freedoms away. And they're going to, you know, they're all about taking our freedoms. And then this kind of proves it, sadly. Let's go on to another part of this poll. This is the first choice. This is where the trajectory. So this is from September of 2023 all the way to January 19th of 2024, what the primary voters for New Hampshire, who they were likely to vote for. What's interesting is for Donald Trump, you know, he started off at 39% back in September. That's probably when a lot of the court cases were coming out, saying, oh, this guy's a crook. They probably weren't sure if he'd even be able to run. 42% in November, so he climbed a bit, but then he dropped back down to 39% at the beginning of the month. But now he's at 50%. So he's kind of gone up and down. People are kind of mercurial about Donald Trump, just as mercurial as he is as a person. But here's Nikki Haley. Look at her trajectory. This is what she's looking at. This is what she's banking on. This is why she's still in the race. She started at 12% in September, 20% in November, 32% in January, now 39% by January 19th. So she's just on that upward trajectory. When you look at those yellow bars, they just go straight, you know, at an incline up. Whereas Donald Trump, up and down, up and down. So Nikki Haley's looking at that. And she's thinking at the next primary, the next primary, the next primary, she's just going to keep going up and up and up until she starts defeating Donald Trump. She's banking on the Joe Biden effect. If you remember when Joe Biden ran in the primary in 2020, he lost the first 2 or 3, or the first 2 for sure, Iowa and New Hampshire, before he finally got to South Carolina and won. So that's what she's banking on. And then Joe Biden ended up sweeping and getting the nomination. That is why Nikki Haley is still in the race. It comes to that trajectory. She's looking at that and thinking she's going to get the nomination. And also, anything goes when it comes to Donald Trump. If they try to take him out in a variety of ways, Nikki Haley would be standing there ready to take that nomination. Here is another aspect to the poll. This is what they care about. This is really important to look at. What do people care about? What do these GOP primary voters care about? Border immigration is their most important. The dark red is when they say this is my most important issue. For the orange, it's my second most important issue, and yellow is third most important issue. But when you combine them, people really care about the border and immigration. Then most of them actually care about protecting democracy or the Constitution. You see 22% say that that's their most important issue. But combined, that ends up being in third. Cost of living is number 2 for these GOP primary voters. Then jobs and economy. Then taxes, budget, or debt. Then winning the 2024 presidential general election. Then foreign policy at 21%. This kind of makes me sad, that 21%. Look, we can't have nice things because we spend all of our money on the military. We're constantly engaged in hostilities around the world. We're bombing everywhere. We're losing our prominence on the world stage. We're losing the goodwill that we've had, people thinking America as heroes. People are not thinking of the United States like that anymore, and it should really bother all of us. And it should be really important because, again, we can't solve a lot of these issues. If you're worried about the border and you're worried about terrorists coming through wanting to harm Americans, then if we stop acting like terrorists around the world, people will stop wanting to come here to terrorize us, right? If we're just like a neutral, happy country, people won't want to come here and meddle with us as much. Of course, crazy people are crazy people and crazy terrorists are crazy terrorists no matter what. I don't think you're ever going to be able to stop them completely, but you can certainly lessen the likelihood that someone's going to target you if you're not targeting them first, kind of a thing. So it's interesting what voters are caring about quite a bit. Let's go to this last one here. This is the status of American democracy, likely GOP primary voters. American democracy is under attack. Most of the voters are saying, 72% are saying that American democracy is under attack. Look, they're watching Donald Trump being carted off to court over and over and over again, twice attempts at impeachment, trying to get him for an insurrection, and even trying to remove him from the ballot, saying that he started an insurrection, even though he's never been charged, let alone actually convicted of that crime. So 72% are saying that they think it's under attack. Another 21% say they think it's being tested, but it's not quite under attack. So that's pretty much everybody thinking that there's a serious problem with American democracy. And what's crazy about it is you've got a lot of Democrats saying the same thing, right? If you probably did this poll for Democrats, it'd probably be the same. It's just the perception is interesting. What Democrat voters would believe is an attack on democracy versus what Republican voters believe is an attack on democracy. It'd be kind of an interesting thought experiment to find out what exactly do you think is the problem? Spell it out. I don't know if Democratic voters can actually really verbalize why they think democracy is under attack. What they've said is Trump, he's a fascist. But then you say, how? And there's really not an answer to that. It's a lot easier for Republican voters at this point to answer that question. Well, they tried to impeach Donald Trump twice. They've been carting him off to court. They tried to remove him from the ballot. Democrats are saying they're not even having a primary. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that could be verbalized coming from the GOP side. But I want to say that with a word of caution, because I do think that the pendulum swings, and it swings often when it comes to, and it just swings based on who benefits from it. So right now, I do think that Republicans have tended to be towards free speech and democracy and upholding democracy. But especially when you look at the election, even in 2016, Republicans were not happy about Donald Trump winning, but they allowed that to happen. When you look at what happened with the Democrats on Hillary Clinton, they wouldn't even allow Bernie Sanders to get through. They were like, no, it's her turn. We've already decided. There's no democracy there. So I think Republicans have showcased themselves to be more lately pro-free speech, pro-democracy, but that can change at any time. If it's no longer useful to them, if it's no longer beneficial to them, it will change. We have to have a principled reason and just a principled guiding light for maintaining free speech in this country and maintaining democracy, even when it's speech we do not like, even when the democracy doesn't go the way we want. We have to have that guiding light, that North Star that tells us, that reiterates this, no matter what party is in power, no matter who's gaining the free speech or whatever it is. And unfortunately, right now, I think it's just weaponized and politicized more than it is actually a guiding light for belief. So Nikki Haley, she gets owned she does a town hall in New Hampshire last week, getting ready for this big primary that's happening tomorrow night. During this town hall, she has to answer a question about free speech. So I want you to watch this.
Hi, Governor Haley. As a college student and a young American, a key priority of mine in this election is the free expression of ideas and bridging the political divide in this country. You've campaigned on being a president for all Americans. Now, it seems that in the past 2 decades, as college campuses have become increasingly left-leaning, Republicans were the voice of centering the dialogue and inviting disagreement. I'm concerned, however, by the rhetoric that's come from Republicans like yourself since October 7th, that we should vet and shut down ideas that we deem harmful. You floated the idea of social media companies verifying all users by name, and one of your opponents, Governor DeSantis, has sanctioned pro-Palestine student groups on public university campuses in the state of Florida. So my question is, will you commit to being principled on free speech, meaning supporting even that speech that you disagree with? And if yes, what's your plan to do that?
Okay, so CNN won't let us see the answer. We actually searched high and low for the rest of that video and hope to get like the entire CNN clip or even just the entire CNN town hall, and it's nowhere to be found. But we found the transcript. It's like they don't want the answer to that question. And so Nikki Haley, this is what she said in her transcript. She says, so I will always fight for freedom of speech. What I was referring to when it comes to our tech companies, there is a responsibility that our social media companies have. What I think they should do is they should show us their algorithms. They should be completely transparent so that you know why they push what they push, why you see what they want you to see, all of that. That's a business transparency situation. So she starts off, she ignores the whole Palestine free speech on college question, and she just goes straight to she's been calling in the past for people to have to show themselves on social media. So she says, when it comes to disclosing who you are, I'm not saying that Americans have to disclose their name. What I'm saying is you have millions of foreign bots where there are no people behind them. When I was at the United Nations, Russia, China, and Iran knew and said it was the cheapest form of warfare. There are millions of bots that are spreading disinformation, that are sowing division in our country, and they're doing this to spread harmful things to our younger teenagers. And what I'm saying is those social media companies have to do something with the foreign bots. Okay, so, these foreign bots are spreading misinformation. I got news for you, Nikki Haley, but you spread misinformation. Mainstream media spreads misinformation. There's misinformation all around us. It's not just coming from Russia, China, and Iran bots. She says, I will always fight for Americans' freedom of speech, but I'm not going to fight for Russians and Iranians and Chinese freedom of speech. And that's what's happening. That's the part we have to take care of. That's an interesting thought. So only free speech for Americans, not free speech as a principle. I don't agree with her. I believe in free speech for everybody. Yes, as an American, I have it protected in the Constitution, but it's a principle, it's a value, a moral principle of believing that all people should have freedom of speech. And she says, no, not for Russians, Chinese, and Iranians, just for Americans. She says, now as a mom, do I wish everybody would put their name next to their comment? I think it would be great. I think it would be more civil. I think we would have less, of the child pornography. I think we'd have less of other things, but I'm not going to say government should make anybody do anything. What I do think is the national security risk when tech companies know that there are millions of foreign bots and they're doing absolutely nothing about it. So if you go, it's another reason why I think we have to ban TikTok, she says. India banned TikTok because it was causing so much social disruption. Nepal did the same thing. So dictator Nikki wants to ban TikTok. She says, why are we continuing to have social media platform that is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and that we know is doing harmful things to us, like putting Osama bin Laden's letter up there and all those things. That's what I don't want. So she doesn't want you to read the letter from Osama bin Laden. She doesn't want you to have information about what our enemies say about us, about why attacks happen to us. She doesn't want you to have that information. Only the narrative she approves is what she's saying. She doesn't want you to have TikTok where you might get an alternative viewpoint. She wants you to have her viewpoint. So she wants to ban these. She wants social media companies that can be controlled by American legislation. She says, I want you to have as much freedom of speech as possible. I do not want those that hate us to be able to have freedom of speech and cause division in our country. I don't agree with Nikki Haley. I think that freedom of speech is a principle that you either agree with morally and ethically on every level. You don't just agree with it for one group of people. That's the problem. When you say, oh, no, I only like it for one group of people, but not for those others. That's what we're trying to fight. That's the battle. And yet she's saying, no, I only want it for some people and not for others. You don't have a constitutional right to free speech if you are Chinese or if you're German, for that matter. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't think they should have that. We believe that they should have that. And we as a free country believe that everybody should have free speech. You should be able to have all the information and then make up your own mind. Make up your own mind about, once you get the information, if you read Osama bin Laden's letter and you think that it's got valid points, you should be allowed to have those opinions because you have the information. If you read Osama bin Laden's letter and you think, it's a bunch of junk and I don't want to hear any of this crap, then don't read it again and you don't have to believe any of it. It's that simple. But to tell somebody else, well, I don't want you to be able to read it because I don't trust you. I don't trust what you're going to believe after you read that letter. You might actually think that the United States is an evil empire. You might actually think that the United States engages in endless war for profit. That's what you might end up thinking. You might actually think that the United States needs to get out of the Middle East and allow them to have their own sovereignty. How dare you think something like that? I do want to play this kind of montage that came out. It's kind of blurry, but you get the idea. It's a montage of Nikki Haley basically just saying one thing and then going back and saying that she never said that because she's a big liar. And that's basically what she said to this student when the student said, well, you said you want big tech to censor Americans by making people identify themselves online. And she basically said, I never said that. Watch this. Watch the other times she said, I never said that.
Governor DeSantis is hitting you for claiming the retirement age is, quote, way, way too low.
I have never once said that.
But what we do know is 65 is way too low, and we need to increase that. We need to do it according to life expectancy.
I never once said Hillary Clinton was an inspiration.
I often say that the reason I got into politics was because of Hillary Clinton.
I never said government should go and require anyone's name.
A huge issue that I'll deal with as soon as I get there is social media. They need to verify every single person on their outlet, and I want it by name.
What I have always said is boys go into a boys' bathroom, girls go into a girls' bathroom. But hold on one second.
When I was governor, they wanted to bring in a bathroom bill, a transgender bathroom bill, and I strong-armed and said, we are not going to have that in South Carolina.
All right, let's move on here. Let me guess. Your medicine cabinet is crammed with stuff that doesn't work. You still aren't sleeping, you still hurt, and you're stressed out. That's how it was for me. So I cleared out my cabinet and reset my health with CBD from CB Distillery. It's been a real change. CB Distillery's targeted formulations are made from the highest quality, clean ingredients. So no fluff, no fillers, just pure, effective CBD solutions designed to help support your health. In 2 non-clinical surveys, 81% of customers experienced more calm. 80% said CBD helped with their pain after physical activity. And an impressive 90% said they sleep better with CBD. So if you struggle with a health concern and haven't found relief, then make the change like I did to CB Distillery. And with over 2 million customers and a solid 100% money-back guarantee, CB Distillery is the source to trust. Now, I do have a 20% discount for you. To get started, just visit cbdistillery.com and use the code Kim for 20% off. That is cbdistillery.com, code Kim for 20% off. All right, the Biden admin is preparing for a long-term battle with the Houthis, and yet they claim we're not at war. Look at this. This is from the Washington Post. This was reported on this weekend. As Houthis vow to fight on, U.S. prepares for a sustained campaign. Says the Biden administration is crafting plans for a sustained military campaign targeting the Houthis in Yemen after 10 days of strikes failed to halt the group's attacks on maritime commerce, stoking concerns among some officials that an open-ended operation could derail the war-ravaged country's fragile peace and pull Washington into another unpredictable Middle Eastern conflict. So it's not working, right? That what they've tried with the Houthis at this point is not working. And so they're saying, well, I guess we're going to do more of the same. And not only we're going to do more of the same, we're going to do it for a really long time, is what they're saying. Because clearly these short-term attacks aren't working. So now we're going to have to do a sustained military campaign against the Houthis. An administration official speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations described their strategy in Yemen as an effort to erode the Houthis' high-level military capability enough to curtail their ability to target shipping in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, or at a minimum to provide a sufficient deterrent so that risk-averse shipping companies will resume sending vessels through the region's waterways. It says, quote, "We are clear-eyed about who the Houthis are and their worldview," a senior U.S. official said of the group, which the Biden administration designated this week as a terrorist organization. He says, so we're not sure that they're going to stop immediately, but we are certainly trying to degrade and destroy their capabilities. So this guy says, you know, we're clear-eyed about the Houthis are and what their worldview is. What's that worldview? The worldview is they want Israel to stop the bombardment of Gaza. They want a ceasefire. That's what they're asking for. They don't want to see these Arab mothers and children slaughtered anymore. That's what they want. That's their worldview. Oh, we're really against that worldview. Don't tell us to stop bombing moms and kids. Houthis, don't tell us that. So he says, so we're not sure they're going to stop immediately because their worldview is they think that's immoral, that you shouldn't be killing moms and kids. That's what they think. And since Israel has announced, Netanyahu's made it very clear that he intends for this war to continue on in Gaza, this bombardment campaign to continue on for another year. Could you imagine? It's been going on for 3 months. How much damage one more year of this or longer? He says it'll keep on going until 2025. Basically going to clear the entire place out and cause devastation and famine until people die of disease and hunger, if they don't die from the bombing or being buried under the rubble. So the Houthis want that to stop. The Biden administration says, yeah, we know what their worldview is. We know what they think, but they're not going to stop probably. So I guess, we're just going to keep on keeping on. We're going to keep on bombing them. We're going to keep on this campaign. And yet it goes on to say here that, so they say Biden this week acknowledged that the strikes had so far failed to discourage Houthi leaders who had promised to exact revenge against the United States and Britain, whose military has contributed now to the strikes in Yemen. Says, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Remember when Biden said this? Oh, are they stopping the Houthis? No, but we're going to continue. We're going to keep on with this ridiculousness. Officials say they don't expect that the operation will stretch on for years. This is what they're saying. They don't expect it to stretch on for years, like previous U.S. wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, which lasted 20 years, and Syria. At the same time, they acknowledge that they can identify no end date or provide an estimate for when the Yemenis' military capability will be adequately diminished. As part of the U.S. effort, U.S. naval forces are also working to intercept weapons shipments from Iran, which ended up resulting in the deaths already of 2 Navy SEALs. Here is the New York Times this weekend also reporting that the 2 Navy SEALs that had gone missing as they were trying to intercept supposed weapons from Iran going to the Houthis. They were trying to board the ship. They ended up falling off one fell off the ladder. Another one jumped in to try to save them. They both ended up disappearing. And now the New York Times is saying that the Pentagon or the U.S. military has said that they are dead. They are believed to be dead. So the U.S. military said on Sunday that it had declared 2 Navy SEALs dead after they went missing 10 days ago during an operation at sea to intercept weapons from Iran headed to Houthi fighters. They're among the first known U.S. fatalities in Washington's campaign against the Houthis, who have launched dozens of attacks on ships in the Red Sea since November, roiling the global shipping industry. But we're not at war. This is what the Pentagon asserts. that even though we're going to go into a sustained military operation that includes bombing the heck out of the Houthis and even ends up with American military members dead, we're not at war. This is actually a Reuters journalist and then a Politico journalist asking the questions of the Pentagon. Watch this.
Hey, Sabrina, is it now fair to say that the U.S. is at war in Yemen? And secondly, there are some reports about a U.S. MQ-9 being shot down over Iraq by Iranian-backed militia. Is that something you're tracking?
Thanks, Idris. I'll take the last one first. I have seen those reports. I don't have anything for you on that, so I'd have to circle back with you. I've seen those reports, but don't have anything to add. In terms of your first question, no, we don't seek war. We don't think that we are at war. We don't want to see a regional war. The Houthis are the ones that continue to launch cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles at innocent mariners, at commercial vessels that are just transiting an area that sees 10 to 15% of the world's commerce. The U.S. is what we are doing with our partners is self-defense. We certainly don't want to see this widen out to a regional war, and we don't want to see this continue, which is why you have seen the action that we've taken. And as the Secretary has stated before, we will continue to take that action if we need to.
Just to follow up on Idris's question, you said that we are not at war with the Houthis, but if this tit for tat bombing, we bombed them 5 times now. So if this isn't war, can you just explain that a little bit more to us? If this isn't war, what is war?
Sure, Laura. Sure. Great question. Just wasn't expecting it phrased exactly that way. Look, we do not seek war. We are not at war with the Houthis. In terms of a definition, I think that would be more of a clear declaration from the United States. But again, what we are doing and the actions that we are taking are defensive in nature. I would turn back to the fact that there have been over 30 attacks by Houthis on 50 different nations that are transiting the Red Sea at this time. I can only repeat so many times that we do not seek war with the Houthis, but we will take self-defense actions if we need to protect our troops, to protect commercial shipping, and to ensure that freedom of navigation is still allowed through international waterways.
Self-defense, that's what she says. Yemen is 8,000 miles away, but it's self-defense. Trust us, it's self-defense. And she says, we're not at war. There's no war here with the Houthis, but look at even Wikipedia says there's a war. This is they're calling it the United States Houthi conflict, also known as, get this, the United States-Iran proxy war. So apparently we're at war with Iran without realizing it. It's an ongoing conflict between the United States and Iran-backed militias, which began in late 2023 and includes the U.S. Navy fighting against drone attacks or American warships and other vessels by armed groups of the Houthi movement. It also includes clashes with other groups and militias in various countries, territories, who are part of an overall conflict with Iranian and Iran-backed groups. So they're saying that we're actually in an Iran proxy battle, even though the Houthis are Yemeni, and they are very much in control of quite a bit of Yemen. They're not, does Iran back them? Sure. I guess then it's the U.S.-backed IDF is how we'll talk about Israel, the U.S.-backed Israelis, the U.S.-backed, the Yemenis they're individual people with their own free will. They're able to make their own decisions, and they've decided what's best for them and to get involved in this. I wouldn't call them Iran-backed, but whatever. It's a war. We're at war. They're claiming we're not at war, but yet 75 people have been killed already in this war on the Yemen side. It says here, this is from I-24 News, over 75 killed in U.S.-led attacks in Yemen, including Hezbollah and the IRGC. British and American airstrikes on Houthi facilities in Yemen resulted in 75 dead, including operatives from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Lebanon's Hezbollah. According to reports, 9 of the deaths from the airstrikes were foreign experts, detailed as 3 from the IRGC and 6 from Hezbollah. Furthermore, these operatives were killed in various separate operations and locations. So not only it looks like we're at war with the Houthis in this 75 dead, and it's not a war. This is like a special military operation, I guess. We're going to use Russia's language, which is obviously a war in Ukraine, but no, it's a special military operation. Don't use the word war. So now they're taking a page out of our book, which is ridiculous. Not the book to take from. It's a fake book, fake news, misinformation. So now not only are we targeting the Houthis, but we've got Iranians and Lebanese in this with the IRGC and Hezbollah. But the Pentagon says, don't worry, this war has not expanded. You've got Israel bombing Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. You've got Yemen. You've got now Iran apparently in a proxy war. We've got so it has expanded throughout the region quite a bit. But don't worry, it hasn't expanded. This is what the Pentagon wants to assert. Watch this Associated Press reporter asking them this question about expansion.
And secondly, on the Houthis, over the weekend, obviously there were attacks by the Houthis. There were counterattacks, and there were several strikes by Iran itself. Can you assess or tell us whether Secretary Austin believes that the Gaza war has already expanded? Don't all of these attacks suggest that the war has done exactly what the U.S. didn't want it to do early on, and that it has expanded, and that attempts to deter the Houthis so far have not worked?
Clearly there are tensions in the Middle East. There have been tensions there since the Israel-Hamas conflict has kicked off. We continue to work very closely with our allies and our partners in the region to prevent the Israel-Hamas conflict from escalating into a wider regional war. When it comes to the activities that we see by the Houthis in the Red Sea, again, they are exploiting this situation to conduct attacks against the ships and vessels from more than 50 countries, affecting more than 50 countries around the world. And so we are going to continue to work with our partners in the region to prevent those attacks or deter those attacks in the future. And we're also going to continue to work very hard to prevent the Israel-Hamas conflict from escalating into a broader regional conflict. But to answer your question, no. We currently assess that the fight between Israel and Hamas continues to remain contained in Gaza.
Oh, what a clown show. It hasn't expanded, don't worry. Yeah, there's maybe some attacks in Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and Yemen and all, but no, it's just Gaza. It's just Gaza. That's what they want you to believe. They think we're stupid. They think we're stupid. So now the United States has redesignated the Houthis as a terrorist organization. The Department of State is announcing, this is from this is one of their press releases that they put out last week, saying the Department of State is announcing the designation of Ansarallah, commonly referred to as the Houthis, as a specially designated global terrorist group effective 30 days from today. So that was on January 17th. They're calling the Houthis a terrorist organization. Now, remember, they're calling the Houthis a terrorist organization because they're boarding ships, right? They're intercepting ships, trying to board those ships. Meanwhile, we had 2 U.S. Navy SEALs die because they were intercepting a ship and boarding that ship. So they're doing the exact same thing, and they're saying, well, we're stopping arms, allegedly, arms that are being taken from Iran to the Houthis. And the Houthis say, well, we are preventing materials to be sent from Israel because we want them to stop a genocide. We want them to stop bombing Gaza. We want a ceasefire. It seems the easiest thing to do would just be a ceasefire, right? The easiest thing to do would be to strong arm Israel into that ceasefire, or at least to say, hey, look, if the Houthis are going to interfere, then you're just going to have to go the long route. They can still get shipments. They just have to go all the way around Africa, which takes 2 weeks longer. So it's not like Israel isn't getting their shipments. They're still getting them. It's just they're getting them 2 weeks delayed. And it's much more expensive because the ships got to go all the way around the continent. In response to the United States designating Ansarallah as a terrorist group, Yemen Parliament actually issued a statement emphasizing that the U.S., the U.K., and Israel should be placed at the top of the global terrorist list in response to Washington listing Ansarallah in its own designated terror list last week, says Al Masirah TV reported on January 21st that members of the parliament in their discussions pointed out the irony of the U.S. designating its adversaries as terrorists while being the head of evil and terrorism worldwide. They emphasized placing the Israeli occupation entity and the U.S. and British regimes at the top of the global terrorism list, asserting that they will reap the fruits of their evils and the crimes of genocide committed against the Palestinian people. Very interesting. And lastly, in the news on this, Iraq has asked the United States to get the hell out. The Iraq leader wants U.S. troops out and wants them to get out of the country. It says right here, this is from Army Times. Iraq's prime minister has given multiple interviews in recent days declaring that his country is no longer interested in hosting 2,500 troops deployed there in support of the mission to defeat ISIS. But that public rhetoric has not translated to any formal requests either to the Pentagon or White House, according to U.S. officials. Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani described the U.S.'s presence as destabilizing in an interview with Reuters published January 10th and no longer justified in a Wall Street Journal interview published Wednesday. There is a need to reorganize this relationship so that it is not a target or justification for any party, internal or foreign, to tamper with stability in Iraq and the region, Sudani told Reuters. And then the U.S. official has responded to that and say that we agree that after a decade since the formation of the coalition to defeat ISIS and its success over that period, there is merit to advance discussions for a transition to bilateral arrangements. So Iraq would like us to leave. A lot of areas in the Middle East would like us to leave, and yet we're sticking around. And why is that? To continue destabilizing, to continue wars, to say that we're countering Iran. The whole idea that Iran is behind some of the worst terrorists in the world, which is not true. Iran is also fighting ISIS. Iran also fights Al-Qaeda. They are Shia Muslims. They are very much under attack by the Sunni radical groups that are the ideology that fuels Al-Qaeda, the ideology that fuels ISIS. That's a different religion. I mean, it's under the umbrella of Islam, but totally different religion. And the people, that ideology, that Sunni, Salafist, Wahhabi ideology hates the Shias. They hate Iran, and they would love nothing more than to see their religion eradicated. And the people often, and they're actually harsher towards the Shia Muslims than they are anybody else in the world. Again, they don't care, Americans, Christians, Jews, whoever, they hate the Shia Muslims the most. So to kind of, there's this idea that Iran is behind all of the terrorism. It's just not true. Iran's also helping fight a lot of that terrorism. Iran, yes, does have groups that they do support, but it isn't the groups that we claim that we're over there fighting. So if we just kind of keep a perspective of why have we been in the Middle East, it's been really to try to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But then it's kind of morphed into this, well, we're fighting Iran in these proxy battles, which is just, we shouldn't be there. We should just get out. We should get out. We should come home. We don't need to be there. And we're having troops now die. It's not worth it. It shouldn't be happening. Just call for a ceasefire and get the hell out. Are you struggling with back taxes or unfiled returns? The IRS is escalating collections, adding 20,000 new agents and sending over 5 million collection letters to kick off 2024. And in these challenging times, your best defense is Tax Network USA. So don't let the IRS take advantage of you. With over 14 years of experience, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in back taxes. No matter the size of your tax issue, their expertise is your advantage. They specialize in negotiating with the IRS, aiming to significantly reduce your debt. Tax Network USA doesn't just negotiate, they also protect your assets from IRS seizures and manage your yearly returns for ongoing compliance. Now, importantly, they're licensed to help with all state tax issues, regardless of where you live in the U.S. Now, the clock is ticking. Don't wait as the IRS steps up its game. Seize control of your financial future now. Contact Tax Network USA for immediate relief and expert guidance. Just call 1-800-245-6000 or visit tnusa.com/Kim. Again, don't let those tax issues overpower you. Turn to Tax Network USA and find your path to financial peace of mind. Well, damning new J6 pipe bomb tapes released by Thomas Massie imply government involvement. We're going to go over some of this footage here. It is highly suspect. We don't know still who the person was that planted the 2 pipe bombs on January 5th. There was a pipe bomb, if you remember, there was a pipe bomb that was discovered near the DNC, and there was a pipe bomb discovered near the RNC that were planted in the hours between 7:30 or 8:30 January 5th. They were then discovered January 6th, and this kind of set off even more evidence towards the insurrection. But now this new video leaked by Thomas Massie calls a lot of, well, it just kind of, I think, creates more questions than it does answers. Darren J. Beatty with Revolver News did a really great breakdown. So we're going to go over what he broke down for us. Here's the first tweet that I want to show you. I'm not going through all of it, but just the most important parts to give you a good idea. This footage shows the discovery of the pipe bomb at the bench outside the DNC headquarters. This first clip shows at approximately 1:05, a man in a backpack approaches a Metro PD SUV and a black Secret Service SUV, informing them of the pipe bomb's presence. Now, interestingly, recent report from Steve Baker, who's with the Pragmatic Constitutionalist, reveals that this man in the backpack is a plainclothes Capitol police officer. So this is what we learned recently, was that it was a plainclothes police officer who ended up reporting the pipe bomb to the Capitol, the Metro PD, and the Secret Service. Now, the reason why the Secret Service was there was because they were on detail for Kamala Harris. She was inside the DNC. That detail was left out for a solid year. For whatever reason, Kamala Harris and her team did not disclose that she was inside that building, just mere feet away from this pipe bomb, and was there during that time. They never really released that, talked about that. It came out later, but now we find out that that person was a plainclothes police officer who reports it. But now you see in this video that they're just kind of, so they're told by this cop, and they just sit there. They don't do anything about this pipe. They've got pedestrians walking all around. Look at these people, just unaware of a pipe bomb. They've been told that there's a pipe bomb, and they're just sitting there, and there's a bunch of pedestrians walking around. It gets worse. Go on to this next one. He says, here's the first sign things are a bit out of the ordinary. After being informed of a pipe bomb feet away, the Metro PD authorities, who are technically on the Secret Service detail, take over a minute before they bother getting out of their car. So again, they're just not doing anything, right? They're just kind of hanging out. Oh, we just got told there was a pipe bomb right here. Kamala Harris is inside. You think the Secret Service doesn't seem to care? Look at them. They're just sitting there. Oh, Vice President's inside, pipe bomb right here. No big deal. Why is it no big deal? Did they already know about this pipe bomb? Is the person saying, hey, by the way, I mean, these are the questions. These are the questions that it leads to. Why are they not hustling? Why are they not grabbing the VP and getting her the hell out of there? That would be the first thing they would do. Why are they allowing pedestrians to continue walking next to this pipe bomb? They even let children walk next to it, which I'll show you here. But let's go on to this next one. He says, now things are getting really weird. Take a look at this clip and note how casually the Metro PD and Secret Service operations lounge about after being informed of the pipe bomb feet away. There's absolutely zero concern for their own safety or for that of their protectee, VP Kamala Harris. Toward the end of the clip, you see a pedestrian walk by. They didn't even warn him that there was a pipe bomb feet away. Incredibly bizarre and damning. So, they're, mosey around. Okay, now let's go to this next one. So this is, children are around here. So if the nonchalance of the Secret Service seemed weird before, now it gets downright scandalous. In this clip, we not only see a bunch of Secret Service agents standing in close proximity to the pipe bomb, we see a group of children cross the street toward the location of the bomb, ultimately walking within feet of it, and the Secret Service don't bother to warn the children of the bomb. So either these Secret Service agents are utterly concerned, were utterly concerned with the life of their protectee, Kamala Harris, the lives of the children and their own lives, or they somehow knew the pipe bomb was a dud. So how on earth would they know that? We know that the DNC pipe bomb was dismantled by a bomb-safe robot. How could one possibly explain this scenario in which the bomb is considered safe enough to allow children to walk within feet of it, and yet it requires a bomb-safe robot to defuse it? So this is causing a lot of questions. Look at all these pedestrians. Look at all these children. There's a pipe bomb. Secret Service is not caring. They're not investigating. They're not rushing Kamala Harris out of there. They're not pushing those children away and say, get out, go to the other side of the road. You can't be here. None of that's happening. So more questions about this pipe bomb. He goes on, says, minutes later, a Capitol police officer walks right up to the bomb and snaps a photo of it, gives a thumbs up signal, and everyone leaves quickly thereafter. Weirdly, the Secret Service behavior after the Capitol police officer takes a picture of the bomb is the fastest we've seen them move the entire time. So there they are snapping a picture, and he gives a thumbs up, and they're out of there. I mean, suspicious, really suspicious behavior. If there's a pipe bomb right there, why are they allowing children to walk through? Why are they not hustling? Why are they not getting, a cop car right there at that sidewalk to block people from being around? This is very odd behavior. Now, I don't know exactly what to make of this. All we can do is kind of look at this and say, this looks like either they're just really bad at their job, like really bad, or they knew that this wasn't that dangerous of a situation, that maybe this was something that was planted in order to serve a narrative, in order to accuse Trump of an insurrection, because they knew that constitutionally, if Trump gets charged and convicted of an insurrection, then he would be ineligible for office. That's what they've been trying to bank on. That's how they've tried to remove him from the ballot in Colorado and in Maine, right, is on that pretense. So maybe they thought this is our chance to get a lot of questions. That's all I'm saying. A lot of questions. Here is a picture of the pipe bomb. This is where things also kind of lead to more questions. Here's an image of the pipe bomb there. And here's Jack Posebek. He says that he was sent in to Human Events, which is his show. He was sent in this picture. He says, has anyone ever pointed out that the J6 pipe bomb looks almost identical to the ones the FBI uses in training? Look at the end cap and timer. And this was sent to him from a source. And look at that. Look at the timer. Look at the end cap of those pipes. I don't know. Maybe all pipes are the same. And what timers are you going to use? Maybe that's the type of timer you're going to use. Maybe this is just how all pipe bombs are made. It's hard to say, but just leads to more questions. I want to show you, this is the FBI video of the pipe bomber. There's some parts of this that are kind of weird, but this is what the FBI released on their YouTube channel. So let's kind of take a look at this video. If you just play it. This is the person planting the pipe bomb. So they're going to show him sitting there. Now, they've never been able to catch this person. They've got all these camera angles. As we've seen, this is the camera angle they decide to disclose to us. This person's wearing a mask and a hoodie. They have no way to catch this person, apparently. Even though there's cameras all over D.C., everywhere in D.C. there's cameras. That they could have followed the trail of this person. So apparently this person is now putting the pipe bomb, just kind of shoving it over by that bush. And then this person now goes to the RNC to put a pipe bomb near there. That way it's both, I suppose. It's an attack on just democracy in general. Okay, so now this is something really weird. Watch this. So this person is going to wave. Their arm is going to come out, and then a cop car. So they're waving right there, and then here comes a cop car. That's who they're waving at, a cop car. So just more questions. But I think a lot of people have wondered about the events of January 6th. It's been weaponized, politicized. It's been used to throw a lot of people in jail, to label MAGA as domestic terrorism, to go after Donald Trump to try to ensure that he never makes it back to the White House. And so, there's a lot of questions around what actually happened there. And was the government involved? Did the government plant the pipe bomb? That's what everybody wants to know now. Were they involved? Why was that person waving at the cop car? Why do they have all these camera angles, but they've never been able to identify this pipe bomb person? Why were the Secret Service and the cops just standing around letting kids walk by the pipe bomb if it was a legitimate pipe bomb, if it was a legitimate threat? Or did they know it wasn't really a threat? It was just something they were using in order to feed a narrative, in order to rile people up, or whatever it is. It's hard to imagine that many people involved in a conspiracy. For me, it's kind of hard to think, really, all those Secret Service and those Capitol Police and all the, could they have all been involved in this sort of conspiracy? But I don't, maybe. stranger things have happened, certainly in this country. That is for sure. But we'll keep an eye on this. Thomas Massie has been doing his due diligence, trying to get to the bottom of a lot of this, trying to find the person who planted these bombs. He's very suspicious and skeptical, so we will definitely be continuing to watch for more evidence of, I think, just malfeasance by our own government, potentially. All right, guys, I want to tell you about my locals community. That button is right down below. My locals community is how this show remains an independent show, because I do get a lot of support from various people in locals. This show does do live show streams after the show, where the show continues on the locals community. I also post some personal stuff there. I hadn't been active on it, I got to admit, for a while, but now we're back and we're being very active on locals, doing after shows there that continue on. So be sure to sign up for my locals community. That button is down below. I do appreciate your support. That is one of the ways that this show stays independent. All right. So the WEF, the Davos summit, is over. It ended last week. But during the WEF Disease X meeting, WHO head Tedros called for countries to adopt the unconstitutional pandemic treaty. I'm going to watch this first clip where he addresses the panic around the term Disease X. A lot of us are thinking, oh, Disease X, this is going to be some upcoming new pandemic. COVID wasn't enough. Now they're coming at us with Disease X. And he first talks about what Disease X is and how and then he's gonna talk about how they're preparing for it. Watch this.
I think that's a big question, but I would like to start with especially the Disease X. It's attracting a lot of attention, and I hope you have seen in the social media. But it's not a new idea. The first time we used the terminology was in 2018. The discussions were in 2017. I was just new Director General. As you know, we annually list the emerging diseases. And MERS could be one, Zika, Ebola, those we know. But then we said, there are things that are unknown that may happen. And anything happening is a matter of when, not if. So we need to have a placeholder for that, for the disease we don't know that may come. And that was when we gave the name Disease X. So Disease X is a placeholder for unknown disease. I just wanted to start by clarifying that because there is already a lot of attention. If I may, although COVID came immediately, we were preparing for COVID-like disease. You may even call COVID as the first Disease X. And it may happen again. Of course, there are some people who say, oh, this may create panic. No. It's better actually to anticipate something that may happen because it has happened in our history many times and prepare for it. Yep. We shouldn't face things unprepared. We can prepare for some unknown things as well because there are basic things you can do.
Okay, so he says that Disease X is a term that they actually came up with before COVID. So he's saying in 2017 or 2018 is when they came up with this term. That alone is a little suspicious. Right before COVID-19 in 2019, we came up with this about a year earlier. And then lo and behold, COVID-19 hits, right? So that alone is a little bit suspect. So he says, oh, but Disease X just means a deadly disease. And what they actually said in the description to this meeting is that Disease X is preparing for a pathogen that could be 20 times deadlier than COVID-19. That's what it said on the World Economic Forum description of this meeting, preparing for a pandemic 20 times deadlier than COVID-19. So Tedros is going on saying, look, Disease X is, we've had this term for a bit, but it's just about being prepared. Throughout our history, we've had this has happened time and time again throughout our history. And so what we want to do is just focus on being prepared. Yes, there have been viruses that have happened throughout our history. Humans have just gotten through it. You catch the virus, you survive the virus. They maybe come out with vaccines years later after they've been properly tested and vetted. That is what we've done throughout human history, and it's worked actually kind of just fine. The human population has like, I mean, how many people are on the planet, right? 8 billion. I mean, we're not suffering unless they're trying to get rid of all those people, right? But the population has continued to increase. The human species is surviving and thriving, alive and well, and even multiplying at exponential speeds. So this idea that, well, we need to prepare for these diseases that have happened throughout the entire history of human beings being alive is nonsense. We actually don't need to prepare. We can just continue doing what we've always done without having all of these artificial controls and surveillance. And he goes on to talk about, we're going to skip ahead a little bit, but he goes on to talk about, communities need to start doing things to prepare. So he's talking about basically IDs, surveillance, figuring out contact tracing. He talks about contact tracing and making sure that those systems are set up. The only way you could set that up is if you're going to do heavy surveillance on your civilian population. That is the only way you could set that up. So he's calling for that. The WEF and WHO, Tedros, is calling for these types of surveillance programs to be set up and protocols that make it really quick to do vaccine passports and, all of the things that come with all of the measures that did not work during the COVID-19 pandemic. They didn't work to stop the virus. They didn't work. The spread happened. Didn't matter. Nothing they did helped, but they want to keep pushing this like as if it did. So I want to skip forward because he goes on later on in this meeting, and he talks about pressuring countries to adopt the pandemic treaty. This has gotten some press. The pandemic treaty basically is, if the countries sign on to this, it eliminates their sovereignty, and the WHO ends up in control of how a country is supposed to behave and how they're supposed to respond to future pandemics, which apparently they're saying there's going to be many of them. Watch this.
The other key in order to have better prepared and to address the disease X is the pandemic agreement. The pandemic agreement can bring all the experience, all the challenges that we have faced, and all the solutions into one. And that agreement can help us to prepare for the future in a better way, because this is about a common enemy. And without a shared response, starting from the preparedness, we will face the same problem as COVID. And deadline for the pandemic agreement is May 2024, and member states are negotiating. This is between countries, and I hope they will deliver this pandemic agreement by that time, on the deadline, because if this generation cannot do it, we're the lived community, we have the first-hand experience, I don't think incoming generation, the next generation will do it. So for our children and grandchildren's sake, I think we have to convert all the lessons we have learned into this pandemic and prepare the world for the future, because this is a common global interest. And national interest, very narrow national interest, should not come into the way. Of course, national interest is natural, but it's the narrow national interest that could be difficult and affecting the negotiations even as we speak. So we're still not prepared, but I think there are many moving parts we have started, good ones, all of us together, that can prepare us better if we focus on the implementation of these initiatives.
So he's saying he really wants that pandemic treaty signed, and that there's a lot of discussion going on amongst these countries, but they really need to set their national interests aside. Did you hear him say that? Put their national interests aside and instead focus on, we all agree on adopting this pandemic treaty that's going to tell countries exactly how to behave when there's the next pandemic. Humans have survived this whole time. Humans have been surviving, but now suddenly since 2017, 2018, the powers that be, especially at the WEF, have decided that they want to start putting measures in place to control and surveil us, even though humans have survived viruses and the plague and all kinds of crazy things time and time again. But now it's different. Now we gotta do more. Really, they just want to collect our data. Really, they just want to surveil us. Really, they just want to control us. And it's pretty obvious. But they're going to use viruses in order to get there because it's scary. Viruses are scary. People freak out. We saw that during COVID-19. People aren't freaking out about the other things they're trying to get us with: terrorism, climate change, right? They use all of these things to try to get us to be afraid, but they found virus. If they say virus, suddenly people start to really freak out. And they're wanting to capitalize on that. They're wanting to then further it. Now they've got this disease X, as if COVID-19 wasn't enough. They said this would be a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Highly doubtful, considering they're still talking about future pandemics and even worse ones than COVID-19, 20 times deadlier than COVID-19, they tell us. So it's not over. It's not over. Another thing that happened at the WEF, Alex Soros, he is now the heir to George Soros's fortune. He's also controlling the Open Society Foundation, which is a $25 billion foundation. So George Soros, throughout his lifetime, gave a lot of money to a lot of different causes, a lot of money to a lot of different Democratic politicians. And now Alex Soros, his son, one of his sons, his younger son, he's only 38 years old, ended up being named the heir, and he's taken over. The problem with Alex is that now you've got this 38-year-old. He's definitely leftist. He's definitely for causes, probably more so than his aging father. He's now in control of $25 billion, but he can't form a coherent idea. Watch this.
But I don't think that that's the fundamental. I don't think the technology is the fundamental issue in democracy. Democracy is messy. I mean, democracy is about contestation of ideas. It's about plurality. It's about people having different truths. Actually, now, fundamentally, how society lives together civically in those contestations is obviously quite tricky. But I think that if we play too much on this disinformation card, we're taking responsibility away from ourselves to actually create a narrative that inspires people to vote and to believe in democracy and democratic institutions. And on the institutional part, I think that we can talk about institutions as these abstract things, but institutions are also about people. And we just heard this point about untrustworthy people, and we talked about things in the United States like checks and balances, which aren't written anywhere but are customs. And one man, Donald Trump, literally came in and just took that all away. But when I see this, when I look at this, more globally regarding democracy, I also say to myself, when was this great time that everybody got along so well and things were going so great? I mean, I think I think that we really have to be careful here in this nostalgia for a time past, because a lot of the reactions we're seeing in society are actually reactions to positive things like equality for women, and greater diversity, which come with backlash.
Well, a lot of people there nodded their head in, agreement because, Alex Soros has $25 billion. So this guy is now in control. This guy is now in charge. And I don't even know what he said. I have no clue what he said. I don't know what he stands for. I'm confused. I just know that $25 billion is going to be going to places that he thinks are important, causes he thinks need to be moved forward, and clearly not Donald Trump. He said something there about Donald Trump. I couldn't quite figure out what it was, the point he was trying to make there. Yeah, this guy is now in charge. So if you worried about, George Soros, you might need to worry about Alex instead. All right, guys, we're almost done with today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. I do want to announce, just if you haven't ever watched the show before, because it was on later, it was usually on at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. It is now on at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. You can catch this show, and we cover a lot of things here, about government corruption, about the malfeasance of government, the surveillance, their attempts to demonize, weaponize, and surveil us and control us. And we talk a lot about foreign policy. So there's a lot of stuff that this show covers. We are happy to have you join us. If you're just joining us for the very first time, welcome to watching this show. Again, it'll be on Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Pacific to 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you've been watching this show for a really long time, now you can actually watch it earlier, because it's not on so late. So you can consume this at any time. And thank you guys so much for watching the show. And we hope to see you again in the next coming days. We do have one more story for you today before we end today's show. Indonesia has now joined in on charging Israel with genocide. So Indonesia is now the fourth country. Indonesia is not charging Israel with genocide, but they are the latest country to charge Israel at the ICJ. So we did have, obviously, the case going on with South Africa that is charging Israel with genocide. We've been hearing that case. We're waiting on the judgment there. That judgment, they get 24, 25 days to deliberate, and then they're going to come back. They're probably going to take the entire time. My guess is, when it comes to South Africa, is that they're going to come back and say that that they cannot charge Israel with genocide, or that they cannot issue the injunction. The case with South Africa is what the judges need to decide on is not whether or not Israel's committing a genocide. This is just a preliminary hearing. The actual court hearing will last years, potentially, against Israel. This is just a preliminary that is intended on issuing sort of like an injunction where Israel's told to kind of cease and desist, that the court thinks that there may be a genocide happening and that Israel needs to cease and desist their activities in order to prevent a genocide, but that the whole case of whether or not they're committing a genocide would be happening at a later time. That's when the courts would convene on that, and that would take years. Now they're going to come back, and my guess, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think they're going to come back with that injunction. I think they're going to say, well, because the ICJ is a little different. It's a plaintiff and a defendant, and you have to take that defendant to court. So if you're the plaintiff, that's South Africa, you're taking them to court and you're saying, we have a grievance between the two of us, and we want this resolved in the International Court of Justice. So the court will come back, and my guess is they're going to say, South Africa doesn't really have a beef with Israel. South Africa didn't sit Israel. One of their first defenses when they came out was, well, South Africa didn't sit us down and talk to us about this. If they have a problem with us, they should have made a good faith effort to actually talk to us about it. And South Africa thought, what good would that do? I mean, we're charging with genocide against the Gazans. So the Court of Justice is probably going to come back and say, well, your beef is, South Africa doesn't really have a beef with Israel. South Africa's not actually being harmed by Israel. South Africa didn't do its due diligence in talking to Israel. So therefore, there's not really a case here between South Africa and Israel. South Africa is attempting to bring forward a case on behalf of the Palestinians who are not a part of the UN, so they can't bring the case for themselves. And so, though, this is what I'm guessing the court's going to say, though we understand South Africa's concern, the beef between Israel is not with really South Africa really doesn't have a complaint against Israel. And so therefore, Israel maybe should consider their actions and they may be genocidal, but we're not going to rule on this because this is about South Africa and Israel's not doing anything to South Africa. So case dismissed. That's my guess of what's going to happen. Now, the International Criminal Court is different. Two countries don't go against each other as a grievance between the two nations. It's instead, countries can bring forward crimes that they believe are maybe being committed, and the International Criminal Court investigates those crimes and then says whether or not they believe those crimes are happening. So it's not between two parties. It's just, we think something is criminal going on over here. The problem with it is that Israel is not a signatory of the ICC, neither is the United States. So there's really not a lot that could be done there. But Mexico and Chile have brought the case of genocide to the ICC, or really they're bringing to the ICC human rights abuses or war crimes is what they're saying in this particular war. So the way it has to be when they ask the ICC to investigate is they have to look at both Israel and Hamas and look at whether or not war crimes have been committed by either party. So that's what the ICC will do. And my guess is they will rule that both Israel and Hamas have engaged in crimes, in war crimes. Now, they might come out and say Israel committed way more war crimes. That's possible. It's likely. But they're probably going to come out and say that both committed war crimes. And that's what, when Mexico and Chile bring that case to the International Criminal Court, that's what that will end up looking like. Now, what Indonesia is doing is they're bringing Israel to the International Court of Justice about the occupation, the ongoing occupation. So this isn't about the genocidal acts happening in this particular war. They're accusing Israel of committing a crime of an occupation, a long-standing occupation. And they're putting their case together on how this occupation of Palestinian territories has been unjust. They said, the Indonesian foreign minister said, quote, "International law must be upheld. Israel's occupation of Palestine, which has lasted for more than 70 years, will not erase the right of the Palestinian people to independence." So they are specifically filing a lawsuit against Israel at the ICJ about the occupation. So while they're battling South Africa, they're now going to battle Indonesia on this. Again, the court's probably going to come back with maybe the same exact response, which is this isn't really a crime against Indonesia. There's really no beef between Indonesia and Israel. And so even though Israel may be doing these things, case dismissed because Indonesia doesn't have an actual beef with Israel. That would be my guess. That's a way for the ICJ to skirt all of this. They could kind of say, well, we think that, yeah, Israel might be doing something wrong, but it doesn't matter, case dismissed. So we're going to see this case Indonesia is now in the process of actually putting together their charges. They're going to be issuing the document the same way that South Africa did. It's going to be interesting whether or not Israel decides to show up to that particular court case like they did with South Africa. They might decide to ignore it. They've ignored the cries of ending the occupation for 70 years. So my guess is they're going to ignore this, and I don't know if they're actually going to show up and represent themselves at the ICJ on this particular issue. CNN has uncovered that this is one thing that was left out of the genocide case in South Africa, but more evidence has been just compiling. One of them was a CNN investigation. They found that at least 16 cemeteries in Gaza have been desecrated by Israeli forces. So they did an extensive investigation, and they found that these cemeteries, which are religious sites, holy sites to the Islamic people, just burial grounds. I mean, these are not to be messed with. And the only reason why you would mess with them is if you're trying to eradicate an entire culture of people from a region. You're trying to harm their very existence. So this is what we've seen in the bombing of universities and hospitals and schools and cemeteries, is to dilapidate the entire infrastructure of just society, of Palestinian society, getting rid of it, eradicating it, saying you have no reason to be here anymore, and then trying to shove these people to Egypt, or they're talking about moving them to Lebanon, or even just dispersing them all throughout the world, trying to get countries to take some Palestinians. And if every country takes a few Palestinians and they can get them off of their land, that is their plan. And desecrating these cemeteries is part of that. It's getting rid of their reason for being. If you don't have loved ones buried there anymore, you don't have a reason to be there, to visit their graves, to honor their lives that they had. You don't have a reason to do any of this. So CNN did this investigation, and they found that 16 of these cemeteries had been desecrated by Israeli forces. I'm going to read a little bit of this article to you. CNN has reviewed satellite imagery and social media footage showing the destruction of cemeteries and witnessed it firsthand while traveling with the IDF in a convoy. So CNN was sitting in a convoy with IDF, and they saw these cemeteries desecrated. They said, together, the evidence reveals a systemic practice where Israeli ground forces have advanced across the Gaza Strip. The intentional destruction of religious sites, such as cemeteries, violates international law except under a narrow circumstance relating to that site becoming a military objective. And guess what the IDF says? Well, these cemeteries are military objectives, right? 16 cemeteries that they have desecrated or completely destroyed or damaged heavily. And what does the IDF say? They say, well, we have no choice but to dig up all of these graves, these bodies. We're digging them up. Why? Well, because Hamas is using them for military purposes. Yeah, that's why we're digging up the graves, because Hamas, military objective, I don't know, tunnels under the grave, who knows what their reasoning is. They're saying, at first they were saying, well, we're looking for hostages in the graves. They are looking for bodies of hostages hiding in these graves that have, you could tell if dirt has been moved recently, you could tell if dirt's been there for a really long time, and they're digging up all of these graves. They know that hostages aren't in those graves, but they're digging them up. This isn't about getting rid of or finding hostages or military sites for Hamas. It's about destroying Palestinian culture in that land, giving them no reason to continue being there. That's what they're wanting to do. So it's just another showcasing of what would be genocide or ethnic cleansing. Definitely ethnic cleansing, trying to get rid of these people, telling them to go someplace else. We don't want you here. And CNN did that report, and CNN has been, very pro-Israel. It's been shocking to watch the mainstream media have to shift and pivot because there's just so much overwhelming evidence that they have no choice, that they cannot continue the narrative that they've continued for 70 years or more, which is that the Israelis could do no wrong, and they're dealing with these crazy terrorist Arabs that are on their land, and it's just the Holy Land is for Jews and Jews only, and all these people need to go, and these other people just won't live peacefully. That's the problem. That's what the assertion has been for 75 years, and now people are seeing the truth. People are saying that they haven't been given options, really, truly, of two-state solutions. They haven't ever been offered real, true peace. Read the fine print. Those agreements always came with massive concessions that were completely unreasonable for the Palestinians, basically signing off on never-ending occupation. If it's a two-state solution, but Israel's going to control your land, your air, your telecommunications, your flight paths, the ability for you to have airports, your borders, your security, they're going to be using their military to patrol your lands. That is not a two-state sovereign solution. It is just not. If we said, oh, Mexico is going to control our borders here, they're going to control our water ports, they're going to control our airspace, they're going to control whether or not we get telecommunications, they're going to control our satellites, they're going to control and they're going to have the military inside, Mexican military inside the United States patrolling around Arizona and California and Texas. And they're going to be patrolling around and arresting people. And then does that sound like a sovereign nation to you? Does that sound like we would be considered a sovereign nation if we allowed that to happen? That is not sovereignty. And that is the only thing that Israel has ever offered Palestine, is this half-assed sovereignty, half-assed state, which is really a reservation. I think actually Native American reservations have more sovereignty and autonomy than what I just described. So you have to read the fine print. The Palestinians have never been truly offered a two-state solution. The Israelis have been very clear for a long time. Americans have just plugged their ears that they're not interested in a two-state solution. They believe that land is theirs, and they've just been trying to figure out slowly a way to get rid of all these Palestinians. They want them off the land. They're making their lives miserable, hoping that they leave. When they move, they're not allowed to come back. They're not allowed to immigrate back into their own land. And it's just been going on for decades and decades. And that evidence is piling up, and that is, the world can't turn a blind eye to it because it's on the internet. You can't hide things that are on the internet, as much as they would love to, and just call it misinformation. Don't believe your lying eyes. Trust me. Trust me. That's what the government, that's what the mainstream media has been trying to say. But things are changing. Things are changing. All right, guys. That is it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We definitely hope that you join us again. If you have any questions, comments, I love to hear from you. I love getting viewer emails, feedback. Maybe you have guest ideas for the show. maybe you have topic ideas or just thoughts about today's show, you can email me, kim@kimiverson.com. Love to hear from you. And if I don't, then I will see you hopefully tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for watching.